Welcome to this week's edition of Leading with Confidence. My name is Confidence Seleme and I'm your host. This program is proudly powered by the William Seleme Foundation, and the foundation's mission is enabling education in Africa. This week I'd like us to talk on a topic I've titled Changing Negative Attitudes. There's a famous adage that says, a bad attitude is like a flat tire. You won't go anywhere if you don't change it. Close quote. The metaphor is quite apt. Many times when we speak about a negative attitude, we focus on the need to change it. Although it's right that we should do that, it's also important that we look at the causes of negative attitudes so that we don't recommend remedies to diseases we haven't yet diagnosed. Just as there are a number of things that can cause a tire to go flat, there are a number of causes for a negative attitude. Let's look at some of these reasons and causes. A. Puncture by a nail or other sharp object. Whenever you see a motorist on the side of the road with a flat tire, many times it's because they drove over a nail or other sharp object which penetrated that tire, causing it to puncture and go flat. This speaks of leaders who on the road of life have encountered some sudden tragedies such as the loss of a family member, loss of a job, loss of a relationship, and so forth. These sudden events cause them to stop on the sidelines of life, to grieve, and to take in the pain of the experience. That's why we should never be quick to judge someone whom we perceive to have a negative attitude, because we do not know the cause or reason behind it. They may have just encountered a personal tragedy, and they might be going through something quite heavy and burdensome. I'm reminded of a story that the famed author Stephen Covey wrote in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He was on a train and a man entered with some very rowdy kids and he sat next to him. The kids went around in the train making noise and even harassing some of the passengers, but the man did nothing about it. When Covey confronted the man about it, he replied and told him that they had just returned from the hospital where he had to say goodbye to his wife and the kids had to say goodbye to their now dead mother. There was a reason for the seemingly negative attitude that the man and his kids were displaying. Their tire had just been punctured in one of the worst ways possible. Number 2, a worn or rippled tire. Another cause of a negative attitude is fatigue. When a tire is worn out, it means it has been on the road for far too long without being checked and changed. There are many people who overwork themselves and eventually get worn out from their tirelessness. Such people do not give themselves sufficient time to sit back and relax so they can unwind and get refreshed. When you have been working far too hard for far too long and you are fatigued, it will affect your attitude. I remember working in an ad agency where one of the leaders was a notorious workaholic who never took leave or rested. He came in very early in the morning and left late at night. I had several conversations with him and it became quite evident in his speech and demeanor that he was fatigued and he was feeling worn out. Balance is important when it comes to tires because a lack of balance causes certain areas of the tires to get worn out much quicker than other areas. We need to maintain a better balance in our lives so that we do not get worn out by the road of life. A consequence of a worn out tire is a loss of grip. Many people lose their grip and have emotional breakdowns because they lack balance and their tires are worn out. Number 3, overinflation. Sometimes tires are overpumped and inflated beyond the necessary or acceptable limits, and as a result, they blow out. This speaks of arrogance in the life of a leader, which eventually leads to their downfall. An overinflated ego, for example, will eventually lead to a blowout because pride and arrogance lead to a fall. A leader with pride and arrogance mistreats and devalues those he or she leads, and they are eventually abandoned by those they lead. This contributes to their failure and dismay. Such leaders are not interested in lifting others up. They care only about their status and their benefits. It is this pompousness, haughtiness, and overinflation of ego that leads to disappointment and flattened attitudes. Whenever you stop by a garage to fill up your tank, the petrol attendant helping you will also offer to check your water and tires. As leaders, we should do periodic checks on our tires to make sure that they are not overinflated. We must monitor our attitudes and verify that we are not mistreating or belittling others. We must keep a pulse on how we interact with other people and be sure to adjust our attitude where and when necessary. Pride comes before a fall, and it's better for us to humble ourselves rather than to be humbled. Number 4, vandalize tires. Sometimes you get people who purposefully puncture or deflate other people's tires. They may have grudges against the person, or they may be envious of them and so forth. In life, there are people who purposefully try to demotivate others. They do and say things which they know will affect the other person in a negative way, but they do and say those things anyway because it's intentional on their part. Many times, such people are also living life with flat tires, and their unhappiness and negative attitude causes them to wish the same misery upon others. They get agitated when people are smiling and laughing because those emotions are not congruent with how they are feeling. As that age-old adage says, misery loves company, close quote. You should be careful around such people and take note of them. Avoid being in their presence if you can, because they can become a toxic influence in your life. If you hang around them long enough, you may find yourself feeling flat and pessimistic. It's also important that we make sure that we are not counted amongst those who are called vandals. Do not puncture other people's tires. That is not how leadership behaves. Much like that petrol attendant we spoke about earlier, you should rather offer to assist them. Ask yourself what assistance you can offer them so that they can continue with their journeys. Number 5, damaged valve stem. The valve stem is the small protrusion from your tire which you unscrew in order to inflate your tire. When it's damaged, loosed, or deadlocked, it can cause air to leak out, and this will cause the tire to go flat. The valve stem is created to let air in, but when it's damaged, it lets air out. This speaks of damaged, loose, or deadlocked self-esteem. Your self-esteem can either be high or it can be low. A steam-raising air can come into it, but if it's leaking, that air will go out. Some people have a negative attitude because they've let circumstances of life, the negative things they've been through, and other factors to cause their air to go out. Their self-esteem has been damaged. They are lacking, or rather, leaking confidence in themselves, and as a result, their tires go flat quite often. Even when they get filled up, perhaps with motivation or inspiration, they go flat quickly because of that leak. Unless the leak is fixed, the tire will continue to go flat. Do not let the words and actions of others damage your self-esteem and cause you to leak self-confidence. Are you running on flat? There's a tire technology called Run Flat which allows you to drive for long distances with flat tires. Some people are running life on flat. They know that the attitude they currently hold is negative, but they have become content with it. They have accommodated their constant state of sadness and misery. They have become comfortable with living life in a mundane way where they make very little progress, if any. A car running with flat tires cannot go at the pace it is designed for. It may have the capacity to do 200 km per hour, but because its tires are flat, it moves at snail pace. The Run Flat tires are there to help you until you get to a garage where you can get the assistance that you require. They can't sustain you on your normal day-to-day journey and trial. We are allowed to experience negative feelings when situations cause us to, but we are not meant to live in that state of negativity. We are allowed to feel hurt when, for instance, a friendship ends, but we must heal and move on from it. We are allowed to grieve when a loved one passes away, but the mourning period isn't indefinite. There comes a time where we must take off the mourning garments. Will you change the tire? We have mentioned several possible circumstances or occurrences that can cause a tire to go flat. These are the causes of a negative attitude. I don't know which one of them is applicable to you, but what I do know is that if you have a flat tire, it needs to be changed so that you're not hindered on your journey. When you purchase a car, you'll notice that it comes with a spare tire and the tools to enable you to change your tire should it become flat. We have the tools to change our tire. We have the capacity. to change our views and begin seeing life in a positive light. Our attitude is informed by our beliefs, and so we must work at changing our beliefs if we are to effectively change our attitudes. To change the negative beliefs that are forming and informing your negative attitude, you must begin changing what you listen to, what you read, and what you watch. Your beliefs are as a result of what you repeatedly hear and what you let take root in your spirit and subconscious mind. If you decide to, instead of listening to those negative songs or news on the radio every morning, you'll start listening to positive, relaxing music, that you'll start listening to credible motivational speakers, authentic preachers, and great leaders from various fields and spheres of society, you'll begin noticing a change in your attitude because your negative belief system will be interrupted and changed. Are you willing to change the tyre, or are you content to let that negative attitude keep slowing down your progress? Well, we've come to the end of this week's episode of Leading with Confidence. Thank you so much. Cheers.